Hey everybody, it's Kara Crossway Brindle. Welcome back to the channel. Familiar face, Kate, a fellow author and colleague, is with us today. Hi, Kate.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yes. So we wanted to come on because we're all about the passion of being writers, putting out more books. You obviously have lots of thoughts and are working on a third book now, technically, right? So you have two books published, third one in the works. And you and I have some really interesting experiences. This is where I'm really grateful to know you because we've been able to talk offline about here's what's showing up in our publishing journey. Is this quote unquote normal? Any red flags? And so today we hope to talk about some of those red flags, things that are considered predatory in the publishing world, things we want therapists to think about if you're like going to go on this journey. So before we dive in, for folks who don't know you as an author and fellow colleague, what would you want to share with them?
I have been a therapist for about 17 years now in the Denver area, and my books kind of span my experience clinically and personally. I published The Authentic Mother back in 2014, and at the end of 2023, I published The Radiant Life Project, which is a kind of master class for people who want to do their own inner healing and trauma work. My new book I'm working on is about relationships and how to identify toxic relationships and stay away from them, heal them, kind of propel yourself forward toward healthier ones. So I really like this balance of being a clinician and writing about it and reaching larger audiences and supporting other clinicians because I think we each have our own set of experiences that's so helpful for each other. Because no one can be an expert in everything. So I appreciate this author clinician community.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked in previous content about plagiarism and people plagiarizing books. So like, I don't think we have to go into that deep dive. But you did mention something that you were willing to talk about is like this evolution of publishers, of what it looks like to maybe work with an agent, thinking about how to put more proposals together. What would you want our audience to know about that? I feel like there's a lot there.
Yeah, there is a lot there. There's so many different ways to publish, from the self-publishing to the hybrid world to traditional publishing. And I think literary agents are kind of held on this high pedestal as this kind of success if you can grab one's attention and have them represent you. And it really goes hand in hand with having a really big following because they don't get paid unless you get paid. And so they want to feel like there's a lot of skin in the game for them, and you are sort of a famous person who's going to sell a ton of books, and that will benefit them. And although I can see the business model behind that, I think it's gotten really distorted with these outrageous metrics of social media. And especially from a therapist clinician perspective, there are so many people on social media who have large followings and who speak to these topics without having professional licensure or a skill set to
Mm,
do so ethically. And even though they may not have the skill set, they're getting the book deals and they're getting the literary agent because they have the following. So
right.
that's just something I find really frustrating. And I have been sort of pouring a lot of effort into building a following and a platform these last couple of years because it is so important to these people who ultimately open doors for us to write our books. And I think I'm going to back out of it pretty soon here because it just feels like such a toxic and unhealthy system, as we know social media to be. And I just have to still believe that there are people in the publishing industry who are looking for quality and not just that quantity, which is so artificial in so many
Yeah.
ways. I don't even know if it equates to book sales. It must. But so I sort of dipped my toe recently into the idea of trying to submit query letters to an agent. I actually submitted to 5 different agents and I ended up having pretty in-depth conversation with one and went pretty far down the road of trying to give this person what they wanted so that they would say yes to representing my book. And in that process, I just got so fired up because it required so much self-abandonment. And my
Mm,
book essentially completely written manuscript. You'd think it could just be like, here you go, this is written. You want to publish it or
have
not?
fun. Yeah.
Like I feel like a complete manuscript is like great. That's easy. But no, it was she wanted so much about it to be changed, so it was almost completely rewritten. And I felt at the
Wow.
end that all the hope and all the light was being sucked out of it, and it was being sort of transformed into this weapon against toxic
Mm,
relationships that I thought people would maybe use wrongly. Instead of using as a supportive guide, they would use it as like a machete to cut down all of their relationships
Oh
that
gosh.
aren't perfect. And I was like, no, this isn't at all what I'm intending with this. This is meant to
Right.
be a guiding light and a support. So I ended up just being really grateful that that path didn't work out for me. And then I'm submitting my book myself, the highest
Mm.
integrity version of my own book proposal, to the publishers who I know and potentially to some who I don't know. But we'll see, how if the door is still open for me without that literary agent, how they have in the past, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can like do a follow-up video so you can tell people where you are on the journey because that feels like a lot, right? If my
Yeah.
heart felt for you and you're like, I didn't recognize my book by the time I had changed all the things this person wanted changed. There's something ironic here about you saying this book is about relationships and toxic relationships. And then you're like, and here's this dynamic where I had to change everything about myself. I'm like, oh, that's like a flag.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and there was this requirement that I needed to hire a book proposal editor and work with them, which, I think I invested, $1,000 into that before I
Mm,
hit the brakes. And I was like, how many thousands am I going to invest here while we circle and circle without getting anywhere and potentially never getting anywhere? So
yeah.
it felt like it was this really conditional process that maybe I was losing from the get-go, right? Maybe she was just entertaining me because I was referred to her by someone she knew and she wanted to
Mm.
say that she gave me a chance, but it's possible that I didn't have a chance from the beginning.
Right. And that's awful just to think about it. Like, here's the time investment, the monetary investment to still get a no 3, 6 months from now, as they like kind of draw things out or milk it for all it's worth. So that's
Yeah.
really where I think this word predatory comes from. And this isn't my language. This is coming from the publishing community, that there are predatory publishers that do all sorts of things, including maybe like string people along. Like, these are my words, not your words, Kate, but like, like draw things out. There's also pay to publish publishers where you pay thousands of dollars for them to publish your book. So you get that ownership of like, hooray, I'm a published author. But like, we don't know how deep that goes of who owns the book. What are your rights? What kind of royalties do you get? Lots of questions there. Other published authors I know have had books published and then pulled from the shelves of like, oh, we're not publishing your book any longer. And it was like a short span of time their book was available. So lots of icky things happening in the publishing world that I think our audience should know about to say who is the right fit, much to Kate, your story of like who's the right publishing fit. Is it, high integrity, a publisher who knows you, someone who loves the book as it is, you have this beautiful manuscript already written. So I think there's lots of different avenues to go, but for our audience to know, like, here's some flags. So if they're requiring that you put down money to pay your book or to publish your book, probably a flag. If they're requiring you to go through all this rigmarole of literary agent and editors and thousands of dollars that you're paying out of pocket as the author, that's probably a red flag. What else would you add to the list, Kate?
I think there's an aspect of shape shifting that's a red flag. Because if you are writing a book, especially as a licensed clinician, I think it's safe to say that you know what you're talking about and that you can
Mm,
trust yourself and your own integrity to be able to put something of quality out into the world. And if someone is kind of limiting that or putting a ceiling on it, kind of boxing you in a way that feels like you're not able to really like breathe or expand, that would definitely be a red flag.
yeah, absolutely. I agree. If like, okay, this is not my voice anymore. So I talk a lot about author voice. We want it to sound like you because then as you go into like a PR experience and you start talking about your book, you got to be able to recognize it as yours, right? Of like, it shape
Mhm.
shifted so much, I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. That would be
Yeah, for
heartbreaking.
sure. And I think in terms of like what you were saying earlier about stringing an author along, I think the opposite is also true. If you feel really rushed and if you feel like time's, ticking by and you're going to lose this opportunity if you don't grab it soon, like we have other authors that we're considering, and if we don't hear from you, that kind of pressure feels, I think feels very salesy to me. And I
Hmm.
think you want to be in a relationship with the publisher because it's a year plus process together, and they're probably showing you who they are up front when they have behaviors like rushing you or stringing you along or asking you to shapeshift. So really taking them at face value, and if this is who they are, if they're being honest with their behaviors, is that someone that you want to work with or not?
Yeah. And so the thought that's popping in my head as you're sharing that, Kate, is do we as authors or even aspiring authors for folks watching, do we get the opportunity to talk to other authors under a publishing arm? Like, do we get to say, what's your experience been like? Can we interview them? Can we go on a deep dive into Reddit or wherever this information lies to be like, how are they to work with? Are they predatory? Are they awful? Are they stellar? So many publishers are different from each other. I mean, even our experiences when we've talked offline of like, wow, night and day different of how they've interacted, the expectations, the advances versus none, royalties versus low royalties. I mean, there's so much here to unpack. So obviously, Kate and I don't have all the answers, but we're hoping this gives you some information to ask some questions if you're going to work with a publisher. Make sure it's truly the right fit. The last piece I'll say is do your due diligence on if a book already exists out there. So Kate is someone I trusted and shared, hey, a book I've published recently has been replicated pretty closely actually. It was kind of weird when I saw it show up. And so asking some questions of the publisher of like, what does that look like on your end? What kind of research is done? Do you do market research? Do you compare? Do you do a quick Google search? Do you look at all the thousands and millions of books on Amazon to say, is there right out there? So that's something else to ask a publisher in your own way or to review the contract to say, are we checking to make sure this isn't duplicating information? Kate, what would you add to that?
I do think that's important to have honest communication and really transparency between the author and the publisher, and also from author to author, if you can connect with others in that same publishing house. I think people could have their own Me Too movement that starts, because if it's happening to you, it's happening elsewhere. And
Mm,
there's a lot of denial and a lot of avoidance, and there are like loopholes that I think a lot of people can sort of slip through to take accountability away from themselves. But it feels to me like it's a really important piece to the integrity of a huge industry that so many of us want to be in. So I think we
mhm,
should take the empowerment within ourselves and within our communities to try to sort of sculpt it from the inside out in the way that works for us, because that's really how change happens when people stand up for what they believe and give a voice to what feels wrong, and they share that with others, and together we kind of forge forward and try to make a better, more honest world, and publishing
mhm.
is no exception to that.
Yes, beautifully said. So I feel like for folks watching the video at this stage, as we're kind of wrapping up, maybe it's about creating a wish list of what you would want in a publisher. Is it about communication? Is it about the royalties? Is it about how often you're paid your royalties? Which Kate and I were just talking about of like, is it often or is it once a year? Which I'm smirking a little bit. Different context for all of you. Is it about marketing? Is that built in? Do they have a PR person on staff that's helping push the book out to the audience members that would really appreciate your content? So, like, those are some things to think about as an aspiring author. I know this is a lot to take in. Kate and I are learning from our feet in the fire, right? Like, no one told us this is the right kind of publisher, this is the wrong kind of publisher. Our experiences to date have helped inform our choices. So, that's what this video is all about. You have two authors here on video talking about what we know, what we wish we knew. So, maybe you could create a wish list or talk to us or talk to other authors, talk to people who work under that publisher already and see what their experience is like. I think that could be a very empowering thing to do. I completely agree. Kate, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I hope we can have you back on the channel to share where you're at with your latest book, your third book, and the fact that you have this beautiful manuscript written. Now we just got to get someone in there to like snatch it up and say, this is awesome. So
Yeah.
hopefully we can give people an update if you're comfortable with that.
Sure, I would love to. I love your channel anytime.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Well, viewers, stay tuned for more videos and we'll keep you updated on our publishing progress. See you later.